We are ready for our next set of trees. Now I took a minute and I mixed up some new color over here. I added a lot more red and a lot more yellow. I have a little test scrap here, and so I can kind of put some on there to see what that color looks like compared to what I have. Now you might decide you really like that. You might decide you want it to be duller. You might decide you want it to be darker. Again, our only concern is that it stays in the green family. I'm actually gonna take a little bit of brown because I really want to get this dark. And the red's gonna make it dull like a foresty green, but I also just want to add some darkness. So I am gonna add brown. Now the reason I'm not adding black is because I find black to be really strong and overpowers the other colors, and I just want some darkness in there. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so I am going to now go in for the second set of trees, right? We have our lightest trees in the background. We have a middle set. There's only a few in there. We have our front trees that outline the pond, and then we have our darkest ones. So we are on tree set number 2. I'm going to do that same technique, and I see there's only a little bit bunch of trees over here. So I'm not going to do a ton. I'm just going to add another layer on top, and it's only going to be about 4 or 5 trees. Now these guys are kind of in a cluster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint them all as one big chunk. I liked this little dabbing technique that I figured out, so I hope you found a technique that you like too. And these little trees can come down and fill this space, because again, we're going to start to overlap our layers, and so everything underneath gets covered up by whatever's on top because we're going light to dark. So as my next dark layer comes through, it's just going to cover up what's underneath. So feel free, this kind of goes almost to the edge, and then we're going to have our last line of trees around the pond. I'm going to touch up this guy, make him a little fuzzier. There we go. Now think of watercolor like the suggestion. It's not as thick of a paint as what we had before with our acrylic, and watercolor is really about suggesting what happens. So I'm just suggesting some trees. And over here, these trees look like bamboo, and I could do some of that, or I could just make some shrubbery, and I might make some crisscrossy marks just to suggest. And I want to make sure there's enough of this dark color in here. So I'm just going to fill this space. I know I'm going to put some trees on top, but I just want to make sure there's some background color underneath. So I'm doing some of that. I'm going to fill in here a little bit. I got some really big trees that are going to cover it up, so don't worry about what happens. Just kind of make sure you get some ground underneath because it was kind of light. So I'm going a little bit into my wash technique. You can see this dry brush for a second there was starting to break. So I'm just adding in some water. I'm just going to blend. I know I'm going to cover it up with a darker color on top, so I'm not too concerned. I might go back with a little extra color. There's going to be some other trees. We're only in that middle color, so, you know, if you want, add some shrubbery. Just to feel like you got something going on in there, okay? I got layer 1, which is my lightest, layer 2, which is my medium. We're going to go layer 3, which is medium dark, and then we're going to have our darkest. So touch up any last little things, any little values you want to add in. And again, we're going to need to wait for this layer to dry because we want to do another really sharp technique on top, which is going to be another dry brush or wet on dry. So we've got to make sure we got dry underneath.